Hey, welcome to Writer's Blockbusters, the show where we treat the final edit of the movie like the script. I'm one of the hosts, Bob Rose. You can find me at Thundergrunt Bob on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. It's all the same. And now, one of the other guys is going to introduce themselves. I'm going to choose Jimmy.
I am Jimmy George. I am a screenwriter and script consultant. My Twitter handle is at Jimmy R. George.
Now, Jamie.
Hey there. I'm Jamie Nash, and I am a screenwriter and the writer of Save the Cat Race for TV and the Save the Cat Beat Sheet Workbook. You can find me on Twitter at Jamie_Nash.
And today we're going to talk about a movie which apparently was a huge hit, and which I'm going to make a hack joke about by pronouncing it as M3GAN. M3GAN, right? We're gonna talk about M3GAN. Before we get into the script, we're gonna each go around the table and talk about our thoughts on this movie. And to start, let's start with Jamie.
Yeah. So this is a movie that I didn't really care about too much, but finally watched on the Peacock. And it was better than I thought. I actually watched it with my wife. We both I didn't get bored and check out and look on my phone. So that's my review of it. That's a good review these days, because nine times out of 10,
2023 review right there.
9 times out of 10, like most movies, I will check out and start, looking at my laptop. So I was curious about this one because it made so much money and it kind of made a stir. So I was happy that I finally checked it out.
Did you watch the rated or unrated?
I watched the unrated version.
Okay.
I do not like the censorship that goes in. No, I don't. I watched the true director's vision of M3GAN.
All right. Jimmy.
I haven't been spending much time on social media these days. So I had heard from my wife that this movie became like a cultural phenomenon with all its memes and its TikTok videos and all those types of things. And so I came into this completely cold and like with no discourse about it. And it came to my attention mainly because we had 3 listeners reach out and be like, "Hey, I loved M3GAN. Like, I'd really like if you did it." So it ended up being like, well, that's one that maybe we should do. And then it's got a 93% on Rotten Tomatoes.
I suggested this.
So just a heads up. Without seeing it, I suggested this. And it's not like Rotten Tomatoes like really holds any weight as far as like the quality of a film, but it had a 98.3% on Rotten Tomatoes. So between that, the huge discourse, the listeners reaching out, the 93%, I was ready. I was like, this is gonna be fucking awesome. That was like the only expectations I brought in. In contrast to Jamie, which I like that we disagree. Like, I like that. This is gonna be fun. I am gonna say this is one of the worst scripts that we've talked about in 93 episodes. There's only like 6 episodes of the show where we go negative, and I'm personally gonna go pretty hard on this. I don't take pleasure in doing that. I hated this movie. I yelled at the screen twice in frustration watching this movie. Now, I will say everything as far as M3GAN goes, the robot and the killer robot content, I loved. But that's not the whole movie, that's just a part of the movie.
We're a script podcast, right?
We're a script podcast, right? And so, like, I totally was watching it and understanding why people enjoyed it, and I could see why, like, her dancing would become like a viral moment. And just while I was watching it, I totally got why people dug it, but I didn't, because for all the other reasons that I'm gonna argue.
It's because you watched the unrated. If you watch the rated, way better editing.
Much better.
It's all
Yeah,
there.
and I did watch it.
Better.
I did watch it twice. I did watch it twice yesterday to try to see if my second experience would be more enjoyable, and I would have been like, well, maybe I was just in a bad mood. But I actually hated it more the second time than the first time. So yeah,
spicy,
right?
Hate
it.
I guess I'm somewhere. I'm not. I don't hate. I don't have any passion for it. So my review is I'm dispassionate about it, but I totally see how it's like, like the script doesn't matter, sort of like in it's. I could see like a packed theater on a Friday night, absolutely digging this movie. Like, you know what I mean? Like it seems like a total theater experience movie, and I can see how it's fun. It's kind of campy. I think there's some, much like it kind of reminded me a little bit of our discussion on Barbarian and tone. Like there's tone here that I think it's like campy, but it's, like we have to approach it without that. It's kind of, you know what I mean? but it's kind of like a bad movie with a budget in a sense. But Megan's great. I can see why, but she is better than the entire enterprise. Her Twitter account is better than the movie. Like her like tweeting with Chucky is better. I had more entertainment from that than I got from watching the movie twice. Do I like this movie? It's fine. It's fine.
Jamie's the one who likes it the most. I love it.
So we have the rare case where Jamie has.
I'm looking forward to the cinematic franchise that is Megan.
I honestly think sequels would be way better.
Totally.
Because to me the problem, I think we will talk about it. It's the humans, and I think that with sequels we'll get rid of those humans and get new humans, and then it's like it's way better.
Miles Dyson dealing with a toy version of the Terminator is not the best first movie for this, I don't think. But anyway,
I almost compared it to Frankenstein, like Frankenstein's monster and everything.
Except if the doctor didn't give a shit about the monster. Right.
It's hard.
If he created Frankenstein to babysit her new kid or whatever.
It's so hard not to be like an internet person and nitpick this movie. It's so hard not to be just like, what the fuck was this about? But we're not going to do that.
I'm going to hold.
Yeah, we'll hold. We might do that a little bit later. But we're going to hold that for right now because Jamie, I need to know who wrote this shit.
Who wrote it? So it's funny because I'm looking at IMDb and it has James Wan as writing it, but I guess maybe a story by or something
I
there.
think it's a story by, yeah.
Yeah. So Akilah Cooper is her name. And what has Akilah Cooper done? Akilah Cooper has
Malignant.
Malignant is the big thing, but I know there's a lot of TV in there too, right?
I love Malignant. So
yeah. So some of the things that I see. Oops, sorry. Okay, Megan, Star Trek: Strange New Worlds. Is that? I think that's an Eduardo
TV show.
Eduardo Sanchez directed episode.
Yeah, maybe
our only guest of the show.
Only guest.
Only guest ever.
Malignant, Jupiter's Legacy, which I'm not familiar with, television series. Chambers, Avengers Assemble, which looks like an animated thing, I guess. Hellfest, which I think I saw.
I've seen Hellfest. Yeah, it's all right.
Yeah.
I have not seen Hellfest.
Luke Cage. She was a writer on Luke Cage, American Horror Story, The 100, Witches of East End, Grimm, and Tron Uprising. So some
good
animation.
For her.
Yeah, lots of good stuff in there. And apparently, of course, she'd be in the James Waniverse with Malignant. Certainly somebody that would be taking meetings and stuff like that. And it was interesting. I did want to mention super quick, like I saw some interviews about this movie, and apparently she was taking meetings with James Wan. And I thought it'd be instructive to talk about those kind of meetings that you go to. Because I actually had a meeting with Atomic Monster once. I sat there, and it's James is not there when you go to the meeting. It's usually a development exec. I think they've had the same development exec for like the last 15 years or something, the main person. Mm-hmm. And usually sit across from them, and they have read a script of yours. In this case, maybe they were already working on Malignant. Maybe they were going to lunch and taking notes, or who knows what was going on. But you usually sit across from them, and usually have a meeting where they ask you what you're working on, and then you ask them, is there anything you're working on that you'd like to hear a take from? And they might say something like, well, we have this idea about a killer robot doll. Then we're looking for some takes on it if you're interested. And then you go off and think about your take on the killer robot doll, and you come back in and you pitch it. And apparently that's what happened in this case. So if her interviews kind of said they had the robot doll. They kind of called it Chopping Mall meets Child's Play or something like that was kind of the pitch. It even sounded like maybe I don't know if they were settled on the creator.
So maybe that's the sequel in a mall.
It could be in a mall. It makes sense.
That sounds great, honestly.
So she her big take on it, and I think this is instructive because this is honestly how you land these pitches. So she kind of came in, and I think they might have already had it was a little vague in the article whether they had the dying parents kind of storyline, So the way she came in and pitched it was she made it personal to her, and she doesn't have kids, and she said, okay, well, I'd like to write. She basically has said, well, if I wrote it about myself, what would it be about?
An aunt, right?
Yeah, and it would be like, I'm somebody that has no business raising kids. I'm not ready to raise kids. And what would be that storyline? So, because you could basically predict this movie out. There's not a lot of unpredictableness in this movie. Even when I watched it, I mean, I could write out the beats in about 10 seconds of this movie. You know what I would imagine they'd be. So the key to pitching sometimes, especially when they have IP or when you have this big director who's already kind of come up with the high level storyline. Sometimes it really is just about injecting yourself into it. Like what's my way in? What would my story be about this? How do I pitch that? And if somehow that strikes them as commercial, then you'll be the person to write it because it's really your story that you're injecting inside of it. So anyway, I think that's sort of instructive because that's how a lot of these movies come to be. Is they're not original specs anymore. I mean, they haven't really been for a while. And sometimes this is totally the type of movie that could easily be an original spec for sure. Mm-hmm. But a lot of times they're just ideas like, we always wanted to make a killer robot movie or, something like that with a robot toy that's kind of like a doll. I think they said an American Girl doll from hell was kind of the pitch.
That's what she looks like. Yep.
Yeah. And what would that be? And a lot of times they have that part already, and they just need you to come in and kind of pitch them a personal version that they feel like, you would bring authenticity to. So anyway, I thought that was instructive.
That's great.
No, that's great. Thanks, Jamie.
For perspective. Yes. By the way, box office on this bad boy.
Yep. I was about to ask.
It's right now at 172.9 million worldwide, about 90 something plus change in the US.
What was the budget?
12 million, which is kind of high, but I think the Blumhouse model that used to be 5 million has trended towards like 10 or 12 lately. Like it's
they've been
rare.
doing pretty good. So
yeah. Like those movies, like if you remember on our first podcast, Get Out, that was one that was 5 million. That was the number that was their magic number. They never made a movie over 5. I bet you if you look at the last few Blumhouse movies, they're all like 10, 12 million. They're kind of B-level movies.
And then we talked about Nope, I think was big. Like that was like a 70 million.
That was like 70. Yeah.
That was Blumhouse?
That was Jordan Peele is just connected.
That's true. Yeah. I guess maybe that wasn't a Blumhouse movie. My bad.
But it was his first non-Blumhouse movie, and I think it was because of the budget.
I wasn't criticizing. I was asking.
I was wrong. I'm glad.
Yeah.
So
he was making it for I think Universal, right? It's a Universal movie. Yeah.
Now, Atomic Monster does because like their Conjuring franchise and stuff like that has trended upwards as far as budget goes. As sequels go, they tend to trend upwards.
No, they do, but I mean, they kind of dominate the horror space, though.
They do.
So,
it's really like I know when I go out for meetings or when they send my scripts out, it's like Blumhouse gets one, Atomic Monster, Platinum Dunes still is kind of hanging around. They get that, and then there's some other. The other ones are less like specific, like Screen Gems. You'll get maybe Ghost House, Sam Raimi's company, and stuff like that. But I'd always say the top two are always Atomic Monster and Blumhouse. Almost always get something. It's because like A24 isn't really a producer, so they're more like you bring your package to them or something like that.
Gotcha.
Right. So it's always like a weird mix of those things. By the way, movies this year, the top 5 movies this year, which is, it's so weird to say this.
I love how much you love the list of top movies.
Me
Jamie.
too. Jamie's is like this is like show premise delivery right here.
I think I like this one appeals to me because it's just so lame so far. It's just like, it doesn't really matter anymore. It's like this list doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So Avatar, Way of the Water, of course, that's going to be number 1, right? And that's split across this year and last year anyway.
Yeah.
So number 2 is Ant-Man and the Wasp. It's at $172 million.
Global or domestic?
What is this? It's
gotta
domestic.
be domestic.
It's domestic. It's domestic. Yeah, I'm looking at domestic box office here. Puss in Boots: The Last Wish is 118 million. That's third place.
Love Puss in Boots.
And then number 4, M3GAN, 94 million.
Wow, number 4.
So this is top 5 so far.
Top 5 so far.
Yeah.
And then you have A Man Called Otto as number 5 at 62. So there's a pretty big drop off.
That was in theaters?
It was. Yeah.
I mean, I didn't even know that.
Me neither.
I thought that was like an Apple movie.
Me too.
Jesus.
No, it hasn't even come out on streaming yet. It's pay for
Okay.
streaming. It's still pay for streaming. Because it was supposedly like an Oscar contender. I don't think it's getting any nominations, but there was hope. 80 for Brady, Jimmy's favorite movie. That
Hell yeah.
37 million. Knock at the Cabin, 34 million. Plane, 32 million. Missing, 31 million. And Cocaine Bear is right now at $28 million.
There you go.
That'll go up.
That will go
That'll
up
go.
for sure.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. There's a good bit of horror in there for January, right?
I know.
But yeah, with horror, getting back to M3GAN. M3GAN. Let's talk about the cold open of this movie, the horror cold open.
Yeah. So one thing I've been kind of cataloging, and I'd almost wanted to pitch this to you, is almost all horror movies, not all, but almost all horror movies start with some kind of cold open teaser.
Right.
I'd say 90% of them. There is a 10% that are much slower builds that you might just start like an ordinary movie and then it takes a sudden left turn. Was Barbarian, did that have I can't remember, did that have a cold open?
I don't think so.
It starts with her showing up at the Airbnb. So.
Another unconventional.
Unless you consider that a horror scene, which it can be, sort of, but
well, yeah, I mean,
not in the way you're talking.
But yeah, not like in the sudden kind of cold open twist kind of thing. Like,
yeah.
So the ones
there's not a time jump like you're talking about,
right? Or even ones like I'm talking about, like Jaws would be a good example.
That's a fantastic gold standard.
That's like, or Scream, has that cold open
10-minute cold
or I think of every Buffy episode. Like
every
would
Buffy
always start a horror cold open.
So I started to kind of think about, and I came up with 3, and maybe there's more. So this is almost like I started to come up with the list of types of cold opens. There's one that I call the prelude open, the prelude horror. And this might be one that happened 50 years ago or something like that. It could have just happened 2 months ago. And it's kind of like, it literally is just the same thing happening beforehand. Or it could be the origin. Can
we give examples?
Absolutely.
Ernest Scared Stupid.
Ernest Scared Stupid was the first one that came to mind.
Are you serious?
No. I don't think I've even seen
it's the
Ernest
first one that came to mind. Because it starts out with the origin of Trantor, the troll. Jimmy, you know.
Yeah, I know.
I've heard many good things
about
about
Ernest Scared Stupid t-shirt, man.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. I've heard a lot of good things about it. Freight Rags had a really cool Ernest shirt. Did you?
Yeah, that's the one.
That's a Halloween movie, man.
Very relevant to screenwriting.
We could do an Ernest movie one time. I'm just saying.
Hell yeah.
So the prelude to horror could be anything from like I said, the origin. It could be like Hellraiser. Hellraiser has a good prelude. I'm trying to think of other ones that might show like the origin of the beast or something like that. But a lot of them are prelude.
I mean, you could consider the Jurassic Park, sort of like. With
Oh, absolutely!
Yep.
It's
The opening
got a cold
with the
open
raptor,
with the
yeah.
raptor. That we
Yeah.
talked about in that episode how so much of it is basically a horror movie. Yeah.
That's two
So-
Spielbergs right there. Right? Yeah.
So there's one that I haven't quite cataloged, and I'll bring that one up third. But so the second one is the one we usually see. It's the Jaws, and I think this one is just introduce the horror. So we just start with the horror.
Yeah.
The horror is kind of in motion. It might be like Michael Myers is killing somebody already or something. Not that I don't think any.
Oh,
Michael
maybe
Myers
that's Jurassic Park then.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the horror is already there and it's already active, and it's not
Okay,
really
okay.
a prelude. It's more something else. Like another example, I have a prelude. I just watched We Have a Ghost last night on Netflix, and that's kind of a prelude. It's like the previous family in the haunted house,
Mhm.
and it just shows a scene where they have to get out. So it's kind of like a prelude. It's like a story happening before the story, almost is the way I say it with the horror. And again, sometimes that can be an origin. So introduce the horror is the one I see most in scripts. A lot of the scripts I read are ones that start out with like a super quick, almost hard to understand what's going on.
Ghostbusters in the librry.
Absolutely.
Would
Absolutely.
that count?
I think so.
Absolutely.
I'm trying
I
to think
think
of
so.
movies we've done on the show.
Yeah.
I think to an extent, Get Out could be considered.
Yeah,
There's the
definitely.
cold open. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah,
Very much so.
And so anyway, that one's probably the most popular. And I do have some instructional things. Like I think with the introduce the horror, and Jimmy, you can weigh in on this. I think where it goes off the rails when it's more than 5 pages long. I think 3 pages or less is the sweet spot. Like at 3.5 is okay. Maybe 4 is pushing it, but once you're into 5, 6, 7 pages,
The exceptions are like Scream, right? That's like 11 pages, but it's
great.
It's
great.
a whole other thing. Yeah.
It's kind of like how Raiders of the Lost Ark is an exception to the intro
Mini movie,
prelude.
yeah.
Mini movie.
Scream's also meta commentary too.
Yeah.
So it kind of helps
Yeah.
along.
But I didn't mean to undercut what you just said, Jamie.
Not at all. I think Scream is an example that somebody would point to and say, well, what about Scream? And I think it's a good example, but I do think it's the exception, not the
2 to 3 pages. Yes. If you
2 to 3
honestly, if you can nail it in one, like the
my
single
only-
page ending.
my only problem with one is I find a lot of scripts that do it in one and it's not good. It's like someone's running through the woods, and axe hits them in the head. Cut. And it's like, yeah, I get that. I always feel tell a little story. Like you turn it into a short film a little bit. Like give me like somebody's running, and it turns out they're the killer or something, or they turn into a werewolf, or do you surprise me, or do something. I can't tell you how many scripts I read that it's very ambiguous what that first 2 minutes or 1 minute is. And it's just kind of like, yeah, okay. It's not getting me excited. It's just somebody got
So
hit
you
with
think
an
you
axe.
need a little extra minute
looks
to
like-
romance it.
Jamie, you don't want it to look like it's an editing thing. Like they just edited another thing in the movie to the
Yeah,
front. or something.
exactly. Like a lot
Which
of
happens.
It totally
It does.
happens.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah, it does.
but a lot of the screenplays I read, I always give that note, and I get like their scene's just fine the way it is, but it literally is just somebody running and then they get hit with an axe. And I'm like, okay, well that's cool and all,
Yeah.
but give me, this is your first page. Give me something good.
Then have them pull the axe out and be like, "Is this all you got?" And then it.
Yeah, exactly.
Here comes another page.
Right,
Yeah.
right,
With
yeah.
yes, that's
And
good.
And that's why I think you need 2 pages, and it's hard to do that in 1 page. Though sometimes you can. And then the last one is what I think this one is, and I see this one more and more. I think Midsommar had this. There's a bunch of them I see that has this, but it's called the horror. I call it the horror before the horror. So it's a horror scene, but it has nothing to do with the horror that you're presenting in the movie
Right.
per se. Like the killer's not involved or anything like that. And that's I've been seeing this one more and more lately.
I'm not a fan of it.
You could loosely, and guys, I'm not really doing this. You could loosely argue that the AI of the older version of the toy is why they stopped the car. 'Cause they were arguing over her using it, and that caused the accident.
So, but the thing is,
I know that's
God,
I know it's loose, but I'm just
here I
saying
go being nitpicky as fuck already. But here we go. Okay, like to your point, Jamie. Do you have more to say before I like say anything about this cold open?
No, the only thing I will say is I've seen the car crash as the horror before the horror many times, and I've written it not so long ago, like 2 years ago. I had the exact same scene as this movie, pretty much. It's ever since we saw the car coming in the window that they don't see, that gag that we see all the time.
Trope now,
yeah. And now they're finding new ways. Like this was the snow in the headlights.
Did you guys see Shazam? It starts with the car crash and everything.
Yeah.
The car crash has become almost like my skip breakfast thing.
Yes.
I just see it a lot. I see the car crash.
My theory is, it's not depressing for the audience, so they stick to that because it's like prevalent. It's not. It's like nobody died of cancer or anything because you don't want people to think of cancer.
I think I also think it is a horror beat. It's a horror.
It's a horror beat too.
My wife jumps at these. It works every time. Like she probably is scared of car crashes, like we all are. And every time it works every single time on her.
Right.
Like even to the point where she's like, the car's about to hit them, and she knows it's coming, and it happens. And she cringes at the sight of it. So. It's effective. I can think of so many movies that have it. Like off the top of my head, what was the one with Shia LaBeouf that was Rear Window? What was that?
Oh, Eagle Eye?
No. The one that was really
Disturbia.
Disturbia.
Like
right.
I think that starts with a car crash.
The one where it's all about an iPod.
Yeah. The Descent, doesn't that start with a car crash or something?
Yes,
like that,
the Descent totally does. Yeah.
It does.
There's a lot of
the horror before the horror.
The horror before the horror. But anyway, Jimmy, I cut you off. Go ahead.
No. I invited you to finish your thought because I don't want to be a dick and not let you talk.
You didn't want to open Pandora's box yet.
By the way, the one other one that I see is Poltergeist. I'm not exactly sure what to label it, but it's almost like the beginning of the horror. You know what I mean? It's like they're here. It's almost like the catalyst for the movie.
Yes, they're here.
Yeah.
So that's not the origin. That's like its own thing. So
right.
Yeah.
It's not like the birth of the poltergeist, but it's the first inkling of it coming into the family's life. So it's something else.
A cup moves or something like that.
Yeah. So Jamie, you want to wrap up those? You want to like recap those 4 types, and then I'll
sure thing.
Go into the cold open.
The ones I came up with are prelude or origin horror, introduce the horror or first taste of the horror. I'm kind of giving them 2 names because I'm workshopping, so I'm figuring them out.
I would go with origin for the first one. It's origin confusing.
Okay, the horror before the horror, which is the one in this one, and then the other one I think is the inciting incident horror beat is kind
of. That's a good way to describe it. Yeah. Right. Sometimes the first scene, like Jaws, is the inciting incident. Yeah. Like it starts with the kill. Right. The whole movie is a response to her body. Yeah. So my complaint with this one, Bob, it's interesting because like my brain was going like, oh, like this is what they're trying to do. Like they're arguing over the device. And they get into a car crash. But the thing is, my problem with it is, as far as like stakes and horror threats, like Jamie saying the horror before the horror, like it's pretty clear that like they were going to crash no matter what. Yep. Like they can't see anything. They don't have snow tires. The argument is irrelevant. Like they're not going to survive no matter what. So I feel like the argument and the tech has nothing to do. It's not the cause. So it's like
Jimmy, the tech made them stop. If that tech doll didn't exist, they would have been at full speed. The girl would have probably died too. If they didn't argue over the tech thing. No. I was just saying I think the people that wrote the movie think that they were doing that.
Right.
And they're not doing it. Like it's not about the tech. Yeah.
So right off the bat, Bob, you are speaking to my issues with this movie, which is idea versus execution. They write this on paper. The husband and wife argue over the daughter's use of the device and it causes a car crash. But the execution doesn't feel that way. It just feels like they were going to die no matter what.
No, the execution, I mean, look, we're trying not to rewrite movies or remake movies, but for me, I don't understand why it wasn't just they're in the snow. Why don't they slide off the road while they're arguing about the thing? And then it
would be more expensive.
Right, but you know what I mean? Like, then it wouldn't be a car crashing into the front of them. They would have always crashed into the front of them.
No matter what.
No matter what. And also, I still question why that girl is completely okay. No,
I don't question that, but
I do.
They got her all bloody, man.
Dude, they got hit by a Mack truck at full speed. I don't know.
So Bob
man.
doesn't believe it from the start.
That I found that a bit unbelievable, but that's fine. She was wearing a seatbelt. I get it.
But like when I left that scene, I was like, oh shit, like they were gonna die no matter what. Like I don't understand why that needed to be that way. Like that's not even really what the movie is about. To your point, Jamie.
Right?
I think what they were doing in that scene was really exposition dump.
Mm-hmm.
I think I don't know that it needed an exposition dump because who cares?
No, it didn't.
2 seconds later, we'll find out that the lady makes toys or whatever. But for whatever reason, they decided to be like, "Oh, your aunt gave you that," and blah blah blah.
Mm-hmm.
And this, and I was like, "Yeah."
I think they also wanted you to know that the girl gets attached to her toys.
Mm-hmm. Which it does. It's effective. That's way.
Effective.
Yeah,
way.
But it's weird because it's like I would say like, and this is I'm going to bring this up later I'm going to bring up the sin. It's not on the talking points, but it's on my 13 reasons talking point. Mm-hmm. The sin is messy, but if it's pointing to one thing, it's allowing your kids to using a device to neglecting your kids with a device instead of paying attention to them. But the debate that the parents are having is in favor of taking the device away, which means they're doing the right thing. They're speaking to the theme. So they're cinematically killing them makes no sense. Like it doesn't translate the theme. It translates that. Oh, if they had just left her on her
Shaggy
device.
And Scooby. They're like, you shouldn't go into the house, and they were right the whole time.
Yeah, but then they die. If Shaggy and Scooby died, that wouldn't be. So it like it can't what the scene seems to be saying, and I'm being an English instructor as I will speak to later, which is I'm finding something where there's nothing there. That they aren't trying to say anything in that scene, but the way for me it translated was like they should be the ones that survive because they're like, we should get her off the device, and then they die. Like anyway.
Before we leave cold opens, I just want to say, like, tonally speaking, because I think this movie has a problem with tone a lot. Like the movie really does. It actually opens up with a comedy commercial.
Mm-hmm. Satirical.
A satirical comedy commercial, which is honestly maybe my favorite part of the movie.
Yeah, it opens like RoboCop.
It opens like RoboCop or Tropic Thunder. Like it literally opens with that, and then it feels disingenuous to go into this almost.
Yes.
And I also question that might have been enough. That comedy commercial might have been enough if you just wrote it a little bit different, and like we just show the girl's parents did die. We don't need to actually see it. I think it's going to work like that.
Yeah.
And just know that she lives in a world with these pets,
But you can feel the studio notes, right? Like we need a horror thing up front. Put it with the test audience. To your point, Bob, you mentioned something. I actually know 2 different filmmakers who have made a movie, and then after it's done, the producers hired someone else to put a cold open in, like an additional cold open. Right, and they didn't even have any creative input into that cold open. And there's no mention of the other director on there. So there's this scene that's stylistically different and doesn't feel like the same thing, but it's a cold open horror movie because the producers were like, we got to put something up front, and there's not enough up front here. And I feel like feels like this
because there's this through line through the movie that is like really mean and cynical towards children. Like I would point to the part with the cop basically laughing about how the kid died. Do you remember that part?
Yes.
Like, the cop literally laughed. He's
his
like,
ear.
Sorry.
We found his ear.
Right. And I think there's that
he's
vibe.
Like, and then he's like,
movie.
I don't mean to laugh, but it's funny.
There's that vibe through the whole movie, and this cold open does not feel like that vibe.
Yeah, that's a good point. I never really thought about the tonal part being a problem. But anyway, I'm opening Pandora's box.
No,
it's okay.
I do think, strangely for me, that's why this movie gets a pass in some of these places.
Because of I like the comedy. I should say that. Yeah.
And
I like the comedy too.
In those same interviews with Akilah, they said they got her because she brought the comedy to the concept. Like, so her intent was to kind of do a kind of goofier, tongue-in-cheek sort of horror. And to Bob's point, this feels like the kind of movies I watched when I was a kid back in the 80s, except it has a much bigger budget and it's coming out in a lot more screens. And for that reason, it doesn't quite feel like the, $2 million schlock fest I watched.
It's like I almost wish they cared less about it being a real horror movie and just had way more fun.
It's trying to have it a little bit both ways.
It's trying to eat its cake. Have its cake.
I wish it went more
100%.
If it went that much more insane, I wouldn't care about all of the problems we're going to talk about.
And
you know what I mean? Like, it was just nuts.
It's the writer that did *Malignant*, which kind of had it skewed in the other direction.
Yeah, right.
So much so that it kind of confused some of the people that watched it. They were trying to watch it in a different way. So
it angered them and thinking this is bad, but actually it's just trying to be nuts.
I have a couple quotes I took from one of those interviews, Jamie, from Akilah. When I have some of the problems that come up, and the quotes sort of speak to why they exist, and but it being intentional anyway. We'll get there.
It's always a dangerous thing to try to be like, we come from a world of schlock horror filmmaking, and there's a whole notion of people kind of so bad it's good, but trying to be that way, and that's always a very slippery slope.
I hate that.
Yeah. It's a really weird kind of thing, trying to be bad.
There's a difference between trying to be bad and trying to be funny.
Well,
I think.
But yeah. And I don't think even some of the people that say trying to be bad would say that's what they're trying to do, but they're trying to be funny in a way that they see certain movies do. And it's a difficult thing sometimes to pull off.
Yeah,
right?
tightrope.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
But talking about what kind of movies this reminds us of, you wanted to talk about urban thrillers and the structure of that?
So when I was watching this movie, because I was thinking Monster in the House, and we've talked about some things with Monster in the House before. Monster in the House being the Blake Snyder genre idea. Blake Snyder has a set of these genres that are kind of story patterns people use, one of which we talk about all the time. It's just Monster in the House. Monster in the House. I didn't mean to go into this, but I just feel like
they love it, Jamie. Keep going.
We pulled the string, and here goes Jamie.
Monster that has 3 elements. It has a monster that it could be a human or a real monster, supernatural, or even an animal or something like that. And then it has a house they're trapped in, and basically the trap, like what are they trapped with this creature in? What's circling around them? Why is there a trap? And then there's usually a sin that brings about the monster in some way. Here's the one thing, though, I always point out, like we've talked about this on a couple other podcasts, so I can't remember which exact ones, but this feels like a Monster in the House movie. Blake Snyder says Fatal Attraction, and some other movies are Monster in the House. But in this one, I don't think there's a trap. They could shut her off at any time. They could send her away at any time. They could recycle her at any time.
She lives with her creator.
Yeah, it doesn't really become a survival movie toward the end. And what that reminds me of is movies like Hand That Rocks the Cradle. Because movies like Hand That Rocks the Cradle, or Single White Female is another one that I think of from back in the day. It's ones where they kind of invite someone in, and there's kind of another story going on while that thing is really just part of the family. And we as the audience see all the red flags and see the things getting more and more
tense.
And we're rooting for that's a great point, Jamie, because one of my later notes, and I will revisit it. Okay. One of my problems with this movie is that we spend so much, like there's only 20 minutes of this movie and it's interspersed where Gemma knows as much as we do. Yeah. We are in the superior position of the threat against her world. And she figures it out at 65 minutes. And then for only 17 minutes is she actually scared of M3GAN. And then she abandons fearing M3GAN again for another 10 minutes. So there's most of the movie, we're like rooting for her to catch up and be afraid. And in your typical monster in the house, the main characters, the final woman, is aware of the horror threat from the lock-in on and working to survive the horror threat. And here we have a story like Hand That Rocks the Cradle, like the those urban thrillers you're talking about, where most of the time the character is unaware to their detriment, and that's like part of the ingredient of that experience. Yes. That's very interesting that you point that out.
Yeah, I think the difference is, honestly, with this, and maybe a small failing, is in those movies, usually you have the character starting to see the red flags in the fun and games section. They start seeing them, and they start getting worried. And then midpoint, it usually takes a turn where the villain or whatever, the monster, is actively, doing stuff to shut the hero down. Where in this one, I think they push it almost all the way out to the all was lost section.
They do.
It's like shifted where fun and games, there's no worry, there's no red flags that the hero perceives. Midpoint, they might start being small, or somebody might start pointing out, it's not a good idea to have your kid raised by, this thing or whatever. They might start pointing little things out that she starts acknowledging. But it's not really until that back half of the movie that she even clocks one or two of these.
Yeah. Like I thought I had it, but I'm pretty sure it's around 60 minutes, because 65 is when she finally looks up the files on the computer. 65 minutes where she looks up M3GAN's files. But the cop comes to the door, and he's the one who has to like make the connection for her and say, "Oh, we just got news that this is the second body that you've been connected to in like 48 hours. And Gemma is like, what? Like, it never occurred to her. She's that unintelligent. I don't want to skip ahead
at all, but like,
So, but that's to your point, Jamie. Like, that's so late.
Yeah.
Well, one other thing though, there are some spots, like for example.
Sorry, Bob, I didn't.
No, it's fine. I'm trying to decide when I want to say things now. Yeah. This movie is
when M3GAN brings up the thing about learning about death, that's a red flag that in many movies the hero would kind of clock and be like, "Oh, that's weird."
That's weird that she wouldn't. Yeah.
In this one, they just kind of say, "M3GAN, forget about that. Moving on." And it's like she kind of does forget about it. Like,
she doesn't behave like a human. She doesn't. So in order for the story to keep doing what the beat sheet needs it to do, Gemma needs to not behave like a human, and that's like any human hearing that.
Can I refine that more though?
Yeah,
sure.
It's not that she doesn't act like a human. It's that Gemma doesn't act like somebody who made a fully functioning android robot. Like, she should be able, like, the audience.
Well, I think we're saying the same thing. Like, I'm saying, knowing what you just said, a human being would go, "Oh shit!"
But I could, as an audience member, I could believe a normal person wouldn't recognize an android starting to become sentient or evil or something. But Gemma created and wrote Jamie, you're a computer programmer. She wrote the programming for this robot and put it together herself. For the audience, for me, I'm like, are you not recognizing the thing that you built is breaking? like
in her defense,
as a computer programmer,
as a computer programmer, I can see like thinking we're way ahead of the curve. But you know what I mean? Like,
right.
Oh yeah, that does that, but that don't worry about that. I could kind of understand that. I do think Gemma is kind of an obsessed sociopath in some ways or something.
He is.
Yeah.
So let me rephrase it. She behaves like a human. She just behaves like a sociopath.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. There is something definitely odd about her that she doesn't seem to have a lot of clue as to.
Honestly, dude, this will come up later. I swear, I kept waiting for a twist reveal. She was so similar to her character in Get Out. I kept waiting for a twist reveal that she had that snowplow kill her sister so that she could adopt the kid, so she could test the doll on the kid, and that this whole thing was her grandmaster plan the whole time, including killing her sister.
We're not
so
supposed
she
to
could...
We're not supposed to rewrite, but I agree. That's such a better movie.
I kept waiting for that. I was like, holy shit, it's gonna be. She acts so like a sociopath. It's gonna reveal in the end that she's been planning this the whole time. Because she doesn't give a shit that her sister died. Not at all. For like 70 minutes, she never expresses any grief at all. Oh, my sister. Oh, that's right. My sister died.
Yeah.
For a cold open, that seems like we should be sad, right? Like it was so brutal. We should be sad about it. But
No,
anyway,
the first scene we see her is like, oh, the new skin came.
yeah.
Let's put it on the robot's face. They're all like giddy.
also, let's not forget she builds this robot, or finishes the new version of this robot, so she doesn't have to be a good aunt. And she has more time to herself. It's a sociopathic reasoning kind of. This kid just lost her.
He's not at all going, I don't think I'm capable of handling this. She's going, I don't feel like it. That's different. That's so different.
Yeah.
And honestly, that's where the urban thriller kind of aspect comes, because it's almost totally. Much the robot babysitter movie as it is the robot toy movie. You know, it's whether it is a toy or not, it's as much a babysitter that helps educate the kid.
Jamie, that sentence you just said brings us to the next point. I
want to. Okay, go ahead.
Don't you think so? I mean, you just said the thing about the toy. We're talking about the not so secret weapon, right?
Yeah.
Can you explain what that is? Unless you have something to say, Jimmy.
No. I was going to talk about some another genre it's playing with, but we've got plenty to talk about. We'll keep moving.
I was just going to say the toy. The thing that doesn't look like a toy but is a toy aspect is so important here. Can we talk
Jamie,
about...
do you want to, because you had mentioned your wife noticing it right away?
Yeah, well, my wife doesn't call it the not so secret weapon, though. I told her, I said, that's what we call it on the,
yeah.
And she was all proud of herself. But as soon as she saw that, honestly, maybe this speaks to how simple the script was or something. But as soon as she saw that little robot in the beginning or whatever that thing,
Bruce
she was
is my favorite part of the movie.
She was like, oh, that's gonna kill Megan at the end of the movie. I mean, she said it in like 2 seconds, but it just was a point of emphasis because we've been talking about not so secret weapons.
Yeah, I'll explain. Yeah, I'll do the spiel. I'll do my pull string.
Sure, go for it.
So the not, it's not just Chekhov's gun, it's the Chekhov's gun, right? Like, it's a specialized setup that if you do a good job, you play it like a joke, right? Like in Doctor Strange, Multiverse of Madness, it's the body of Doctor Strange in another universe, and they play it like a joke, and then it comes back to be the thing that saves the day.
Right.
It's Luke using the Force in to blow up the Death Star. It's crossing the streams in Ghostbusters, the oxygen tank in Jaws, Ripley's loader in Aliens, Cecilia using the invisibility suit, which this was very similar. They show you this machine that the character's going to wield, later to defeat the monster. Dutch's mud camouflage in Predator. The well camera and the giant juke balloon in Nope. Singing Christmas carols in Elf in order to get everybody to have Christmas spirit and save Christmas. And the black phone itself and the black phone. So yeah, like it was funny, like you mentioned it, Jamie. So I was looking out for it a little bit more than I usually do. And I was like, there it is. I did the Leonardo DiCaprio meme and pointed to the screen. That's it.
There it is. Yeah.
23 minutes. We meet the not so secret weapon. So yeah.
But I know we all have to talk about writing is also a matter of design and stuff. But
because we deconstruct. We're
deconstructing
business.
It. But I don't know if the script describes what Bruce looks like. But this is one of my problems with the movie itself is that doesn't look like a toy to me. That's not a toy. Bruce does not read as a toy in any way possible.
Yeah, I hear.
He looks like a giant piece of military grade weaponry.
Yeah, he's a mini Iron Giant.
He's a mini Iron Giant, and I question. I was like, wait, why is this a movie about a toy maker, and why is Gemma not just working for the government? And she gets the bad idea to use her technology to watch her niece. Once again, rewriting the movie, but I was also like, why are we dealing with toys at all? Like, we didn't have to. It would make more sense, wouldn't it?
Or I think or simply just make it like she's somebody that has been obsessed with robotics and artificial intelligence, and she was adopted by the toy industry.
The toy industry.
It's basically if the short circuit engineer became a toy make, like, yeah.
But they don't play with her abilities in this area at all in that way. You know what I mean? Like, it's never mentioned that. It's never brought up that she could be doing these other things. No,
and that's another part of my later here when we're going
like in Small Soldiers, they put military chips in toys, and it explains why all this is happening.
The how and why is very skirted over. Yes,
exactly.
Yeah. Why is it happening? Because the movie needs it to, and that's okay.
It's fine. I mean, like, I get why. Once again, I get why it's a fun movie for people, but. On paper, under a microscope.
I think it's super instructive that I'm gonna spend the last 20 minutes of this episode tearing this apart, and no one gives a shit. It's got 93 on Rotten Tomatoes, and it's giving birth to a franchise, and it made $100 million, and it's a viral sensation. So who cares about the script issues?
I mean, the dancing, and then her fighting with the Chucky Twitter account is pretty great. She literally said "Okay, Boomer" to Chucky. Come on. So let's get into that.
All right.
Can you do it in a way that me and Jamie can respond to the points?
That's what I'm gonna try to do. So just so the
audience knows, we don't know Jimmy's 13 reasons why he thinks the script is bad.
Yes,
you just wrote down that.
So I want to bring three things up before I'm gonna
sure, yeah.
And Jamie, I'm sure you've dealt with this too. So our first thing is, we talk about this all the time. We judge the movie. We talk about the movie as the final version, as if the final version of the movie is the script.
Right.
But most likely, very often, the problems that exist in the final cut were not problems on the page. And somewhere along the way, between script to screen, they became problems because whatever scripted stuff smoothed these issues out either didn't turn out right, or they did test audiences where they felt like they didn't need it, or just get cut all together just because. And so a lot of times we're talking about things that aren't really the fault of the screenwriter. They're not really the fault. They're really the fault of the process itself, eliminating some of the stuff that the screenwriter had in there that made sense to all this and gave more texture and blah, blah, blah.
We do that like this so it's accessible to people listening, because that's the only thing they have.
So the danger of I'm just speaking like a sensitive. So bring out your bingo cards. I read amateur scripts all day. Basically, my job is I do script notes for most of my clients are just starting. So they're just learning the craft. And often what happens when a movie that gets away with a lot of lazy writing becomes popular and a hit, then people tend to emulate these movies anyway, and they replicate the problems that we see because it translates to it's not a big deal, right? You can be lazy and get away with it. It doesn't matter. So I always think it's a bummer when a movie is well received and it's poorly, what I perceive to be as not well written. And so that's why I'm sensitive to these things, and I like to talk about them. It's personal for me, right? Because I basically spend all day dealing with a lot of the issues I'm going to bring up. And I shouldn't be feeling that way when I watch a movie that's made for $12 million by, a team that's made so many movies before. Like it's unacceptable to me. As someone who works in this industry, it's unacceptable. So anyway, the second thing I want to bring up, I said I'm going to bring up three things, but I'm just really going to bring up two. And that's this. And Jamie, this is something I feel like you probably experience and can speak to just from being a teacher alone, which is typically the main problem I deal with the problems I deal with as a script consultant stem from something I call beat sheet execution versus cinematically earned emotional response, which is a writer writes a beat sheet and then they put it on paper, but they haven't filled the gaps in between those beats with the growing pains and the setups and payoffs and the things that give emotional and measurable evidence to the audience about these big beats. And so here come the beats, and on paper, the beats, if you just read the beats aloud, you're like, this fucking beat sheet rocks. Like, it's so good. Like that moment is so good. Like that's like such a great constructed idea. But then when it's executed on the page and executed in the film, none of that stuff is emotionally able to be absorbed because those gaps weren't filled. There's not enough growing pains. Like George, we talked about in Back to the Future, George McFly has 7 growing pains before his big emotional moment of arc. So there's 7 beats in between introducing him as a coward that's bullied by Biff to him punching Biff in the face. We have 7 beats in between there to earn that big, and they're growing pains, right? So sometimes they're a regression, sometimes they're a progression, and back and forth until finally. So that's why we feel this sense of profound growth from him, because we get all these status updates about how he's growing and changing as a movie. But what as a person throughout the movie, but what I read all the time is scripts that just give us introducing George being bullied, and then maybe somewhere like 70 minutes in, giving us 1 growing pain, and then George punches Biff, and they're like, that's all we need. And you're like, for 60 minutes of this movie, George hasn't been shown to be afraid of Biff. You know what I mean? And so that translates not just to arcs, but to setups and payoffs, to all sorts of things. And I feel like the problems I'm going to mention can all be traced back to the beat sheet was great. The execution is missing all these little moments to make it emotionally impactful. So, Jamie, do you deal with that a lot with students, the beat sheet problem that I'm talking about?
I think it's even a little bit before the problem you're encountering. Like, what I see in beat sheets a lot is I see good beat sheets, but there's no execution in them. So it's kind of what you said. So it says fun and games. It might describe the fun and games as M3GAN becomes a very good companion to the girl, but seemingly grows tense and overprotective. And that's not a scene. That's like the intention of the scene. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And so there's a whole nother level to write the intention of the scene. So it's similar, very similar to what you're saying, but even a step beyond. Like, I see a lot of that. Like people write that, and I think that is a good first draft. By the way, I think
I do too. That's a great first draft. Yes,
I think so. My process, not that this is the question, but this is a writer's podcast. My process is to do that pass first. Usually, mine tends to be mixed with execution and stuff too. Like, I might come up with a really cool midpoint idea that's execution and not, just intention. And then I write a second one that tries to translate that into actual execution. And then I might, depending on my mood, do note cards.
Jamie, do you mean by that, like, how am I going to convey this to the audience?
Yes.
What you're saying. How am I going to make it so it's visibly or vocally or both measurable to the audience what I'm describing on this beat?
What are the scenes that communicate this idea? What are the visuals and actions that communicate that idea? That's the next step. And whether you do that in a beat sheet or whether you do that in note cards, and honestly, I've written 120 something screenplays at this point. Sometimes I just do it on the page. That's where I can, I'm like, I can figure this out in the page. I'll figure it out in the page.
It's intuitive to you now.
It's yeah. So I might skip a step, but I will actually do it there. And I'm not in the shoes of this movie where I had to get it all, like, I had to get the outline checked by the studio and, Blumhouse and everybody else. So I'm just doing it for myself so I can keep it a little more fun and loose. But anyway, there is at least 2 more steps involved in that. But I think note cards is the best way to go. I think to do and by the way, I have a beat sheet, or I'm sorry, what do they call it? The beat to board. No, I have a video series coming out.
Oh, okay.
Very soon.
Hell yeah.
It's not out yet, but I did a whole video series on how to translate your beat sheet to a board of note cards. But
I did not even know I was setting you up for
yes.
a
Is that going to be released on like the Save the Cat YouTube channel or something?
It is. It costs money, but it's a paid kind of webinar thing. But it's it basically, I think that's the best way to do this, honestly. I mean, we weren't planning for me to plug that. It's not even out yet. It will probably be out by the time you hear this. It's coming out in the next month. But I think the best way is then to go take it to note cards. And so come up with 40 note cards. And on those note cards, you write what the scene is. You write, is it interior, blah, blah, blah. Who does what? What's their goal? What's the conflict? You do all that stuff. What's the twist in the scene? So you take the beat sheet and you expand it into note cards. I find that's the best way to do the best way. That's
awesome.
Level.
Yeah, and if you don't, then like I'll give you an example of a previous episode we did in The Rise of Skywalker. J.J. Abrams outline was out there for us to read, and we read it on the show. And there's a scene where Rey goes back to the planet where Luke had gone into exile that Rian Johnson, by the way, named Act 2. She goes back to Act 2, and on the outline it says Rey decides to give up on being a Jedi and instead remain in exile on this island, just like Luke did forever. And then Luke interrupts and raises the X-Wing out of the water and motivates her to get back into the fight. But the movie just has Rey sitting on a rock looking at the water.
Yeah.
And so it's supposed to be this. I'm using a big arc plot cheeseburger example that does this very problem.
Right.
So it's just Rey staring at the water, and we as an audience are going like, why is she staring at the water? Why did she come back here? She didn't tell anybody what she's doing. We didn't have any previous vocalization from her of what her motivation is. She's just staring at the water. And then Luke shows up, raises the X-Wing, and basically is like, get your ass back in the game. And she never says, no, I'm giving up. Like, this is it. Like, I'm done. She just goes, okay. And like gets in the X-Wing and the movie goes on. That's what I'm talking about. I feel like there's a lot of moments in this movie where we have the Rey feels this and that and this and that. Gemma feels this and that and does this and that. But there's no evidence of it on the page whatsoever or in the movie. Instead, we just see Gemma like blank stare sociopath. And we're going,
she's kind of like, huh? Wow. Okay, well, she just kind of like goes past.
So that being said, some of these are general. Some of these are very specific to the moment at hand. But I'll go down the list and I'll go ahead, Jamie.
Just one more thing. I mean, if you ever experiment with Chat GPT doing Save the Cat beat sheets, that's what it does. And I honestly think that's its limitation is no matter how much you try, because I've experimented with it just to see how good it was. No matter how many notes you give it, it has a really hard time coming up with clever executions. That's where we're ahead of it. By the way, I tried to get ChatGPT to give me a script analysis of this for this podcast because I thought it'd be funny since it was an AI.
Right.
So ChatGPT, I think, is up to 2001, so it knows nothing about M3GAN. But for example, as you were talking, I typed into ChatGPT. I said, write a story about an American Girl doll robot that gone bad, right? And for example, it says, setup. We learn about Rosie's advanced AI technology. Now she's designed to learn from her interactions with Lily. It named these characters Rosie and Lily. That's all it gives you. So it doesn't give you the scenes. And this is exactly what I'm talking about. And exactly, on one hand, this is what my students do. So ChatGPT is almost as good as my new students. You know what I mean? But on the other side, it can't get better, and my students can.
Right.
That's it's not specific enough.
Well, it can't get better yet, Jamie.
Not specific enough.
Can't get better
okay.
yet. Yep.
So I've made a list. God, I love that, Jamie. You just did AI
to talk about AI.
To talk about an AI movie. This is great. So I'm calling this. And I take no pleasure in this. I don't want to be talking about this, but I feel like I have to. 13 reasons why I think M3GAN is a bad script.
According to your own poll, people want you to insult movies, Jamie.
I know, it's so weird. We've only gone negative 6 times, and I hate it. I don't like doing it because I know how hard it is to make a movie. I've made 7 of them, and, they destroyed me. But here I am, the shambles that are left of me are talking about another person's script and bashing it. What am I doing with my life?
Right.
Anyway, number one, the first 10 minutes encapsulates the story problems of the whole movie. It nails the M3GAN content, but gives us only surface level emotional insight into Katie and Gemma. We are given so little information, so little things that need fixing about these two characters by the end of the first 10 minutes, which is the end of that presentation, where the boss walks in. So we absolutely know her thing that needs fixing about her employment. That's pretty much it that we know about Katie before her world changes forever with this, having to be a guardian. We don't even know anything about Gemma's personal life. Like, we know nothing about her except that she's a robot creator, right? Like, that's it. And the same thing with Katie. The only thing we learn about Katie is that she likes to use iPads and has a toy, and that her parents are dead. But like, that's only a little bit, I mean, it's very a very dramatic thing that we learn about her, but it's not much, right? Like, we barely know anything about Katie. Like, if you were like, tell me something about Katie besides those two things, you couldn't. And if you were like, tell me something about Gemma in the first 10 minutes besides the fact that she is a robot engineer, you couldn't. So that's a problem. Like, you learn everything you need to know about Marty in Back to the Future within the first 10 minutes. So that's the first thing. The second thing, and this is a big one, the whole movie sort of is a lot of the emotional like disconnection for me, I think, stems from this second point, which is Gemma's meaningful choice to become Katie's guardian happens pretty much off screen. So like, like becoming a guardian of your niece is a big fucking deal, right? But we don't really understand how she feels about it. You know what I mean? Like, we don't get to have any moments with her wrestling about this choice, right? And it's like the biggest choice of her life. And because of that, we just see her sign a contract, and there's like literally a second of hesitation on screen in that montage. Like, we don't really know how she's feeling about this, right? So how can we really connect with it's supposed to be a really meaningful choice?
We don't even know later when the social worker asks her, like, were you close with your sister?
Yeah, that's another. So I'm bringing it up. Like, so social worker asks, like, you wanted this, right? You wanted to take custody. And we said, and she says, yeah, of course. The thing is, we don't have any context to know whether that's a lie. Like, we don't even know when she says, yeah, of course, if she's telling the truth or not. And that is huge, right? We're just getting to know this character even more. And the fact that we can't even tell you, honestly, is she lying to the social worker?
Honestly, it feels more like she has no clue what she's doing.
Even like
it doesn't feel malicious or like she has a point. You know what I mean?
The ambiguity around that is really emotionally disconnecting. But here's the thing: I don't think the story thinks it's ambiguous. I think the story thinks that it's very clear that this is the truth. That she genuinely wanted to take in her niece with trepidation, of course. Sure, yeah. But anyway, yeah. Go ahead, Jamie.
What part got me a little weird is when the social worker says the parents wanted to take care of.
So that's my next point. Okay. So I'm gonna build to that. Okay. So we've talked about how the choice is basically left off screen, and granted, there is one line she calls her friend. She's like, she's here. I can't handle this. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. But it's downplayed so much. It's so without emotion. Like, she's on the phone with her friend. She's here. Like, I don't know what to do. That's about as emotional as she gets about it. And I'm not saying all characters need to be bombastic with their emotions, but you have to at least show us how a character is feeling, right? And when you're having like a monotone, half-assed expression of concern about the biggest decision of your life, it doesn't really feel like the main character
she's
cares,
deciding
right?
to become a mother, basically.
Yeah. And so anyway, so taking all that account, I'm going to use the quote from Akilah Cooper to some of those interviews, Jamie, that you spoke about. So here we go. In contrast to not hearing any of that, right? Here we go. Akilah Cooper says to Vogue, I immediately knew her name was going to be M3GAN, and I knew I wanted the story to be about a girl who was orphaned and would need emotional support. Putting myself into the story as a single woman, my world would be completely shifted on its end if I had to suddenly take care of a traumatized child. My older sister in the early aughts, when I first moved to LA, called me because she and her husband were writing their will. And she was like, hey, if anything happens to us and if anything happens to our parents, the kids are coming to you. And I was like, why are you calling me with this? What makes you think I can take care of 2 children? You're not going to die. Our parents aren't going to die. I'm ending this phone call right now. That's how you dramatize how a character is wrestling with a choice.
Well, that goes with how your interpretation to screen didn't like her. She might have written all that in there,
like that.
Did not make it in, right?
And so my theory is there's a bedside death of her sister scene that we didn't get to see, that they wrote and didn't shoot, or they shot and it didn't make the final cut because they added 2 minutes to the front end before the robot. We got to get to M3GAN. Never mind emotional connection with the characters. But yeah, so all of that texture, all of that connection with Akilah, the writer, that's fucking great, right? But that's not there in the movie. Like, that's missing. And since that's missing, we can't connect with how instead Gemma comes across like a sociopath. So the next thing, Jamie, to your point,
you're almost
Jamie,
making me like the movie more because of how horrible.
Well, imagine if that was in there, right?
Very subversive movie.
Yeah, it's like so subversive that she's so terrible.
Well, imagine if that was in there, right? All of a sudden, you have a deeper connection with how, right off the bat, with how Gemma is feeling about all this, and it gives you a baseline, to measure the growing pains of her off of that. Right. That's her old way. We have no insight to her old way, basically. Beyond, she was a single woman who is on Tinder all the time and makes robots. Anyway, okay, the third one, Jamie, like you just said, the off-screen abandoned threat of the parents. So we never meet the grandparents, and then the threat of them adopting Katie feels like it's going to be the main motivating force of antagonism for all of her parenting growth.
Like M3GAN makes her look like a bad parent, and then they're going to take her away and everything.
So at 18 minutes, she has this debate with the social worker, and the social worker's like, the parents, the parents of the father are willing to take her, and she's like, if Nicole wanted Katie to go to Jacksonville, she would have told me. Well, when did that conversation happen? Not for the audience. How can we even tell if she's lying or not? Like, how can we even, I call it hearsay. It's hearsay. If you don't give the audience evidence of that before, then when she's saying it, we don't know if she's telling the truth, because she's been shown to be a bit deceptive, mainly because we're so disconnected from her. We can't tell if she's telling the truth or not. So number one, I don't even know if that's true. Like maybe her sister told her, no, when I die, we didn't get to adjust the will, but we want her to go to his parents, right?
Dude, it's incredible because it's like no, she's staying with me, and then the rest of the movie is her trying to basically create a surrogate to watch her because she doesn't want to deal with the kid anymore.
But
it's awesome. It's fucking hilarious. It's so funny.
I knew this would get you laughing.
I mean, it's really funny, right?
It is. So rewriting the movie, like how you make that work, tell me if you agree or if you think I'm wrong or if you have other ideas, is all you had to do was bring the parents to the hospital. All you do is you have the parents and Gemma standing there together, and then the lawyer shows up with the contract. And even if you want to keep it in montage, you show some tension between this old couple and Gemma, and Gemma's the one that gets to leave with her, right? Then we understand, we have visual context to who the fuck these people are, and that it's actually true. And then we feel pressure for them because we have something to compare it to. Well, look, this old couple, they're going to take way better care of her. But just saying it in a line, we don't know these people. They could be fucking insane, right? They could be like Randy Quaid. And like you would be like, I don't want to go in with Randy Quaid.
They also don't
Go ahead,
cover
Jamie.
how the girl. Oh, sorry, Jamie. Go ahead.
No, Jamie,
no
go ahead.
worries. I think also if you kind of poked holes in her ability, like she feels self-conscious about, but she kind of has an obsession to help her sister for some reason.
Yeah.
Then it shows a character doing the flawed thing, right? So she wants to do right for this kid so bad.
Yeah.
That she's doing it in the flawed way, which is taking a massive shortcut that's dangerous.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Yes, but they don't give you that.
It's weird because it's hinted at, but they don't spend any time with it at all or really sell it. You can
and in my opinion, the hint is ambiguous.
Yeah.
Because we know so little about Gemma as a person at that point.
Well, it leaves us to kind of fill in the blanks.
Yeah.
Like we're like watching it and it's like, I guess I guess her motivation is,
and in my opinion, you should never be guessing what a character's motivation is when you're watching a movie, like the main character. Why does my character like want to do?
At the danger of again rewriting a little bit, could you also have done this like the girl herself didn't want to go to Jacksonville, doesn't like her grandparents, or
you could absolutely have
you know what I'm saying? Like
putting up a fight. Yes,
but the girl has no.
The girl's
say,
an equally blank slate.
Right.
An equally blank slate. We do not hear her emote about the loss of her parents for 46 minutes.
Right.
It's the most insane thing that could happen to a kid, and it's never fucking mentioned from the kid for 46 minutes of this movie. It's insane. That's not how a human behaves.
I'm sorry for laughing so much.
That's not how a human behaves. But the beat sheet needs her to hold off all that emotion until the big pitch to the company. And so as a result, they don't have her speak until an implausible time when she would speak.
There's not even a scene of Gemma, like, just saying to her, like, what do you want to do? Where do you want to go?
Yeah.
Like nobody, it's just none of it. It's just, okay, I guess I'll take her, even though I don't have any time to look after a kid.
But my main problem with that, Jamie, to your point about the parents, is that it's a setup with no payoff. It's a huge setup with no payoff.
Right.
It completely disappears for the rest of it. Is never mentioned once again. It's set up as like she says at 18 minutes, the social worker says, I need to make my own recommendations to the court as to whether or not this is a safe space for Katie. So you're going to need to make one or two adjustments in order for this to work. And then the social worker shows up, but she's never a threat again. She sees Megan. She's like, and Megan even like threatens her. She's like, this is incredible, but you better watch out for the doll's, her attachment to the doll. Never mind the child endangerment. Never mind the exploitation of your niece. Not the social worker doesn't give a shit about that. She's cool with that. But now you got to watch out for the child. This is attachment that you've created between the doll and the... Anyway, so the social worker for me changes her behavior implausibly as well for the rest of the story. Like she starts out as a threat to being able to maintain guardianship of Katie, and then the rest of the movie, she's just there to sort of add another sense of another person that to the Megan recipe. You know what I mean?
I was gonna say the grandparents like were a redundant thing that you could have just left out that line completely.
Yeah,
and just had it the social worker versus if the aunt was the only potential guardian outside of the state. Yeah, I think that would be a lot cleaner. Yeah, it wouldn't make us question. Gemma has to do this. Is a different script than Gemma's like, yeah, yes, I will.
Yeah,
like you know what I mean.
Would it have been so hard to have the social worker say, "Is there anybody else she can go to?" And she's like, "No, that her parents are old,
are dead.
Dead. How about just everybody's dead? That'd be fine."
Yeah,
Because
with Amy and I, like, when I stopped and said, "Why doesn't she send her off?" Because she obviously doesn't want her.
Yeah,
remember the shot of her sitting back on with her laptop and turning the TV on? That was like the light bulb moment for me. I'm like, why did you make a robot to watch a child when you don't want to watch a child at all? Like she didn't even look like she was programming anything. It looked like she was literally binge watching TV.
And like if you go down our subversive path, which are more interesting, the one we're laughing at. You could almost see a version where she is trying to get rid of the kid until she realizes she can be a test subject, and then she
can exploit her.
She can exploit the kid,
right? Which is what she realizes. Her value that we're seeing, what little we get, is that she can exploit her. That's why she becomes valuable to her. Because we don't hear her talk about her sister and how much she cares about her sister. Like the social worker, I forgot to mention that. Bob, you teased it, but the social worker says to her, hold on, I'm flipping back. The social worker says, I missed it. It's later. The social worker is basically like, were you close with your sister? And she literally shrugs and is like, I don't know. I don't know.
No, I'm saying that would have been the moment where she was like, my sister meant the world to me.
Yes.
And I'm not going to let her child be alone in this world or something like that.
Later in the movie, they have her in like 80 minutes after never talking about that whatsoever in any way, shape, or form for us to measure and connect with. Gemma says all of what you just said, as if she's been, as if we've been watching her go on a journey of self, change and growth, but it's bullshit. It rings false because none of that happened in between her adopting the kid, taking guardianship in 70 minutes when she's like, my sister meant the world to me. Really? Because she never seemed to give a shit about her until this 70-minute beat sheet moment when the story needs you to say this.
Honestly, the way that the movie opens with her failing at the M3GAN robot, and her whole goal that is said out loud is she wants to advance the AI to a new, you got to keep moving forward with science or else, everyone will go past us. And then the way that the movie plays out, what you're talking about right now, Jimmy, it's even more on the sociopath level because it's like she's introduced as that's her goal in life. And then she realizes she could use her niece as a way to test out the thing.
I absorbed the movie. I absorbed the movie as is what I'm supposed to be like, as that's what's happening.
Right. No,
that's the way it feels to me, since we never get her talking about her sister or getting Katie to talk about the death of her parents. Anyway.
I'm starting to like the movie more now. I'm not even joking. It's like so hateful towards this. Towards kids, it's awful.
Jamie, so this is the next one. And she has a quote that sort of explains this. The writer explains why it's like this, and I think it's instructive based on her quote that it doesn't really matter to audiences depending on the movie. So, do you want to? I'm saying number 5 is a messy sin. A messy theme. So, Jamie, do you want to kind of restate the sin that you just said in Monster in the House, like about a half hour ago?
Sure thing. In the Monster in the House, in that idea, that story pattern, there's usually a sin that brings about the monster, and the sin doesn't have to be something that your hero does or anybody. It could be something society does. The example we often give is like Poltergeist. Our second Poltergeist bump today. So
and we've done Poltergeist on the show.
And we've done Poltergeist. Go check it out. So Poltergeist is one where they removed the tombstones and then built the houses on top of the graveyard. So that was the sin that kind of brings about the monster to an extent. In Jaws, it might be not closing down the beaches is what, ultimately.
Profits over people, both of those basically.
So there's usually some sin involved in these horror movies. And the reason is there's almost like a moral check to be cashed at the end of these movies. Like there's a reason they're almost like morality tales where that some sin has to happen. So some blood payment almost has to be paid at some point. And
we've shown us how all the classic horror movies that we've been breaking down and some of the newer ones that are really well constructed, this tracks. Like you can identify the sin. It's very simple. It's very clean. And every character is a different reflection of that sin, and the good people are a reflection of the opposition of that sin, and the people who get their cinematic justice and get killed are the negative. They are the sinners, and Sometimes it is messy, even in good movies. But in this one, I wanted to see what you guys thought about the sin, and then I wanted to respond by seeing what she says about theme and the theme of this movie. So, because I have a quote from her about this. So, what do you think is the sin based on the movie? This isn't like a test. Like, I think it's a fucking mess, is what I'm saying, basically.
I mean,
go for it.
No, Jamie, go first.
Well, I'm circling around three things, but I'm going to go the highest level one, which is letting your kids be babysat by.
That's what I would have said.
Technology, and that's that's a through line here and there. We do get a couple debates from
how the movie
about
opens,
this.
literally.
Yes, and it's how the
we mentioned Frankenstein before. There could be a dabbling with science that you don't understand before.
That's absolutely something that's a sin that's being shown to be what's leading to the horror. And for me, I think child exploitation is like a 50, like half of this movie is about a child being exploited for profit, and and that's another sin. And then there's a lot of discussion about choosing your occupation over your personal life. There's a whole bunch of moments where people are like, you're a workaholic, you need to get a life, basically, you know what I mean? And that's another sin. And so, like, my point is, since it's not consistent, it feels messy, and it's hard to like really feel like what's the lesson the movie's trying to make. And so I wanted to see what she said about that, and I think it's instructive. So the Vogue people, in the Vogue article, the Vogue said Meg is raising conversation about elevated horror. Side note, I fucking hate that term. Versus gory, campy, traditional, fun horror. How would you categorize M3GAN? And Akilah Cooper says, personally, I enjoy a good B movie that knows it's a B movie and delivers to the viewer what it promised. So to me, M3GAN is a fun horror film about a doll killing people. That is what you are paying your money to see. We do kind of have a theme about AI and human interaction and a little bit about parental control. But at the end of the day, this isn't about theme. It's a movie about a 4-foot doll that murders people. I think this is a fun B horror movie, and I am happy to be a part of that. So there you go.
She's not wrong.
She doesn't care. So therefore, who cares, right? So I think it's instructive that here we have a cheeseburger movie in 2023 where like the screenwriting world is basically preached like you gotta have a theme. It's gotta have thematic resonance, right? And we have like a theatrical released
hit
big budget horror movie where the writer is telling you, I don't care.
Is that something you've heard before from like somebody who's had a successful movie? Like I don't know. I didn't care about theme. Have you ever heard that? Like,
I definitely think there are writers that I can't pinpoint one, but I've definitely heard writers that say, I never think about theme or don't think about theme or that's not something I just worry about entertaining people or whatever. You do hear that from some writers quite often. So that's not necessarily a new thing. It's just some writers aren't really informed by that. Now, most of the writers that say that do write the theme. They're just doing it intuitively, and they're not necessarily saying make a stupid movie.
Because they're so strong storytellers, they write to theme.
They're just like, all I worry about is entertaining, and then they construct something that is very thematic. It's not like they purposefully avoid it or think it's a bad thing. But some people don't. I think a lot of them just don't like to telegraph it too much as well. So
yeah,
part of it.
But I thought it's a cool quote from this day and age in the screenwriting world to hear her say.
It's honest. It's very honest.
I love it. I love it. I appreciate it. Like, I think it's cool. And it informs the movie, right? So what I was basically doing was being the English professor who's finding something that isn't actually meant to be there at all, so there isn't like a sin, like, you know what I mean? Like, it's not even intentional. So there you go. So I think that's interesting for listeners.
I mean, like,
if you read one reviewer after another, they're like, it's got so much social commentary about parents in 2023 and how they neglect their children with devices and it's so socially relevant and blah blah. And it's like, well, that they didn't really care about that.
I think they were just using what's naturally coming in society. They're just like, kids like cell phones.
Mhm.
All right, what if a cell phone was a doll? It's like, just like you said, intuitive. But I actually was going to say, I think another theme in the movie that I thought you were going to say from that quote was about how, like, think before you have kids. Some people shouldn't be parents. That to me would have been a theme from this movie, right? Like, some people are not cut out to be parents.
No, it's true. It's true. I didn't mean to laugh about it, but
no, laugh. It's funny.
Yeah.
Because like the person who wrote this movie obviously does not like kids very much.
Well, I don't know.
I know. I'm not saying that about her, but I just mean like the movie is very cynical and like mean towards children. It does not love children. It really doesn't.
It doesn't feel like it. Yeah.
It does not feel like
it. But who
whatsoever.
knows? I don't want to put words into the writer's mouth.
No. I'm not putting words in her mouth. I'm saying how it feels when I watched it.
That's what you feel. I get you.
Yeah, I feel like a hatred towards kids and their culture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
funny.
It is funny.
Yeah.
A movie about a killer doll. Yes.
Yeah.
So I have a bunch, but I'm gonna pick and choose because Jamie only has 10 minutes. But I'll just keep going down the list, and we'll see how many we get to. So this is a big one. So another common thing I see all the time, which is something I call writer's choice versus character's choice, which is based on the evidence given to us of how a character behaves. The character suddenly makes a choice that it is completely inconsistent with the choices they've made the rest of the movie leading up to this. So Gemma has been shown that her career matters most, right? Like, and the soccer game, where they meet with the kids, where it starts with her saying like, I have to go home because the big launch of M3GAN is in a week and I have a bunch of tests and it's like the most important thing of my life. And then Katie's like, well, can she just come to the soccer game with me? And she's like, all right, that's cool. The main thing is that like, if anybody in the world finds out about M3GAN, the most important thing to me in my life, my career is over. So, and my livelihood is threatened forever, but it's all good because nothing's gonna happen. So I think that this is a writer's choice versus character's choice. I do not believe the Gemma that we've been shown, who's so driven to make M3GAN a success, would ever let that doll out of the car. And yet the story needs it to happen because at this beat sheet moment in the story, they need a kill here that delivers on the promise of the premise. So I don't know, Jamie, if you ever encounter writer's choice versus character's choice, but it's like a very common thing for me.
Yeah, and what you said about it's kind of the certain amount of kills, how many horror beats do we have, something like that, and they made them not have found a way to elegantly. Maybe that was just a crass way they executed it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's go ahead, Bob.
Also, this scene is also one of my biggest problems, and I think it's a writing thing, is I said the world building thing.
Mm-hmm.
Other people not being shocked by this extreme advance in technology. I understand it's a campy movie, but the jump from the Furby things up to this, characters would react to it. They wouldn't just like take it in stride so easily. That is a fully functioning android with working arms and legs to the degree of a human being, and nobody seems like. But
the movie needs them to just barely brush it off.
I understand
so
that
it does that. No, but I'm saying I agree with you.
Yeah, it's just like they're so nonchalant about it, and she's nonchalant about, like, to go with what you were saying, Jimmy. Gemma is nonchalant about people possibly seeing. Did M3GAN walk to the little table? You know what I mean? The table that she was sitting on. Did she walk there? Was everyone okay with her walking with her human legs? It's just like, I understand it's campy.
I hear you, Bob.
It's not believable with the audience. Like, Gemma's not protecting.
That's a writing
enough, right?
thing. That's a writing thing. Yeah, Gemma's not behaving.
She's not behaving like this is a miracle of technology.
Like the story thinks that she
created a new frontier and is acting like it's not that big of a deal.
Okay, so I'm gonna just try to get two more in the 5 minutes we have Jamie left. Okay, Gemma's meaningful new way choice. This is at 75 minutes. At 75 minutes, right before the big, celebration and presentation to the world about M3GAN, Gemma chooses Katie over work and abandons the M3GAN project. But in my opinion, the choice is undercut by two other choices that are extremely dumb from a character and shitty, which is she completely says, M3GAN's your mess, coworkers. You figure it out and you deal with this problem. I'm just going to go home and put my niece to bed now that I'm good with being her mom. Number one. The second thing is she completely stops worrying about M3GAN as a threat. She's like, she goes home and they just chill out. There's 82 minutes. So there's like 7 minutes have gone by. M3GAN's out there killing all these people. And Gemma's like, everything's great now. She's no longer a threat. She stands over Katie in the bed at 83 minutes and smiles like, this is great. Life is great. Completely no longer believes that M3GAN is ever going to be a threat to them again. And so for me, those two things undercut what the movie wants to be the meaningful choice, which is, and again, we haven't seen the growing pains toward that choice. So it's like cinematically under. It's like, oh, now you're saying all this stuff about your sister and how you wanted to protect Katie because your sister meant more than anything in the world to her. How come you didn't care for the last 75 minutes? Anyway, okay, so this is
on the reverse of that too. How do you not know what M3GAN is capable of? You created her.
Right.
You know, if she goes rogue, I mean, you gave her super strength. You know how capable she is to annihilate systems, and you're fine with just going home.
So
you created an atom bomb, and you're just like, it might blow up. It's fine.
It's gonna be fine.
Yeah,
she's not a threat to me anymore. There's a Kevin S. Tenney who made Witchboard and Night of the Demons. I went to a seminar once of his horror seminar, and he has this quote that I've used on the show before for horror characters, for horror heroes. And that is, if your character makes all the smartest choices possible, the ones that the audience would make, and then the monster still gets the upper hand, that's how you make a great horror story. But if your character is making choices that we wouldn't make because we're smarter, then we lose our emotional engagement in that character, because it's like, well, if they're not smart enough to survive, it's basically like they're setting themselves up for this. It sucks, but
can I point out, I'm sorry, I try not to delay. I know we got everything.
Yeah.
But like the opening of the movie when her head blows up, they literally say that thing the guy says like, oh, I forgot to put the power coupling thing in, or I forget what it was called, and her head blows up, right?
Yeah.
How is that not a Chekhov's gun thing where they like?
Yeah, I thought that was coming back. Well, they did it with the screw basically, and the screwdriver in the head.
Sort of. I just figured that the two assistants would have used that thing to
pull it out of her head. Yeah, they
completely
melt her face
or something. Yeah,
I thought that was a possible other not so secret weapon. So this is my favorite note, and I want to get you guys to chime in on this. So another thing I see all the time. Yeah. This is the last one, Jamie, because I know you got to go. What I see all the time in scripts is out of nowhere, something becomes. We get this relationship drama that comes to a culmination in the final climax that the writer has never given us any evidence existed for the whole first 2/3. And all of a sudden, here we are in the climactic moments. And all of a sudden, the character that's like the bad guy or bad girl is behaving like there's some relationship that existed between the hero and the villain that we never knew about. And so you go, what the fuck is like? It's all set, all payoff, no setup. So Gemma and M3GAN's mother-daughter relationship is all payoff, no setup. So M3GAN has this big monologue that says, she talks about the long development of how how Gemma basically raised her. She's like, all the bedtime stories you read me, all the different versions of me, like basically says, remember how special our relationship was and how much you were involved in making me what I am. And then she says, I'm not going to you treat Katie the way you treated me. I'm going to show her what real love looks like. There is not one single moment. Like, imagine, like, that is such a fucking great idea. That's the idea versus execution that I'm talking about. Imagine if Geppetto, who is yearning for a child, then gives birth to a real toy that comes to life. Then Pinocchio becomes a fucking maniacal killer version, and Geppetto has to kill Pinocchio. That's what they're trying to pull off here, but we never knew that Gemma thought of herself as a Geppetto.
No, she doesn't care about Megan
Pinocchio.
like that.
She never.
No.
She
She's
never.
usually like, "Shut up, Megan."
She's like,
Yeah,
you're fucking product, dude. What are you talking about?
There's zero. Yeah, exactly. There's zero emotional evidence at any point in the movie that Gemma sees Megan as her daughter, and that Megan sees Gemma as her mother. And so because of that, this big, huge, amazing, and I love the monologue, right? Like this big climactic culmination of all that is completely emotionally weightless, because we have no evidence of it before. So the note is, you have to give us emotional evidence of conflict that exists between two characters relationship, and otherwise, like, we can't feel anything about it. So that was my big note was like, holy shit, like, imagine if this was a Geppetto Pinocchio relationship.
Or you just add in a line where Gemma just acknowledges, like, you're not my daughter. I don't care about you.
Right.
Like, there's not even
the ambiguity of that. Right. But I actually think the movie thinks it's doing Pinocchio and Geppetto in a good way. And so my guess is maybe there were scenes that did this, right?
Yeah.
That they shot that existed. And they were like, it's not, just cut it. We don't have time for it. And they were like, as long as you put it in the climax, it's going to work. But I'm saying it doesn't.
It reminds me of screenplays where you see where they don't really understand how to do a character arc, but they know they need to do one. And then it just kind of happens all of a sudden in the end. There's a character arc. Yeah.
Which I think
comes out of nowhere.
Includes this movie.
Well, that's
I went through enough.
So just know that Jimmy could talk for another 4 hours about how much he hates this movie.
I'm sorry.
Further convincing me that it's actually a really funny movie, more so.
Look at his Twitter thread. He's going to do
he's going to go
500-part Twitter.
Ape shit all over this
my
movie.
Twitter hiatus, and then everybody at Universal is going to blacklist me.
He's going to subtweet Megan's Twitter account.
Jason Blum is going to get somebody to make sure I never have a career, and even though I don't have one now. And
so wait for that. Jimmy's going to go nuts online. We're all looking forward to it. Finally. Yes. Well, we actually did get to everything we wanted to talk about.
Yes.
And like, I think Jamie's already plugged everything he can.
I got nothing to plug.
Jimmy, you got nothing to plug. I just want to say thanks to everyone that is supporting me and the show on Patreon. I really appreciate it. Other than that, we had some scheduling issues. We're gonna restart. We might skip a week or two coming up, but we're gonna restart our schedule and be on time. We promise, everybody.
Yeah.
Other than that, I think that's everything, guys.
Thanks for listening, everyone.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Hey, this is Bob Rose, and thank you for listening to Writers Blockbusters. If you'd like to financially support the show, please consider joining my Patreon. I've been producing the podcast for several years completely out of pocket, and I'd like to keep producing it ad-free and no longer at a loss. If you'd like to help, head on over to patreon.com/Bob Rose Sucks. That's right, Bob Rose Sucks. And if you want the one and only Jimmy George to help polish up that writing project you're kind of struggling with, head on over to scriptbutcher.com. As a listener, you already know he's the best there is, scriptbutcher.com. You can also support the show by simply sharing it or leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. We appreciate both. Thank you for listening, and see you next episode.